So good evening everyone and welcome to the International Center Goa for this book discussion, Kitaab-Books and discussion. We normally get people who have a new book out, and it depends on obviously my interests, and then I think about, okay, what would interest the general audience, people who live in the neighborhood and that sort of thing, retirees, students, whoever else might be interested. But when I saw the book, Breakpoint on the Middle Class, and I thought, my God, this is something, this is a book for which I need to get Saurabh Mukherjea, and I reached out to him via email. The same day his office contacted me and said, well, he'll come and let's look at the dates. So Saurabh, thank you so much first of all.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you.
For coming to Goa, for coming to the International Center. And as an academic, or more or less, I have always been interested in the middle class. Now, for you, in the book, it's mostly about the income part of it and all that, but whether the middle class has an identity, the class identity of the middle class, because middle class mobilizations, middle class coming together has been decisive in so many ways in improving the quality of democracy, public services, and whatnot.
Yes, sir.
So Saurabh agreed, and so here we are. A quick introduction. Saurabh heads Marcellus Investments, and he has been a founder of a few other companies, worked in London before he came to Bombay, and he has also written several books. I lost count at around 5 or 6, but
yeah,
I think
that's generally right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after about 5 or 6, I said, okay, that should be it, and he assures me that that is it, about 5-6 books. I have also indicated to him that we'll be happy to host him when his next book comes out, especially if we have the Goa Arts and Literature Festival happening at that time.
Absolutely, yeah.
And on matters economics and finance, I think those are generally safe topics, so I know nothing could go wrong. And thank you all for coming as well. And next week, very quickly, next week we have another that's a public lecture which is happening next week. You have the poster outside. If you can come for that, that will be great too. What we'll do is we'll begin with a short presentation by Saurabh, about 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and then of course it comes back to me, and I'll have a few questions. And after about 30-40 minutes, the floor is going to be sort of all yours. Okay, so that's how I will run it, Saurabh. So.
Fantastic. Thank you, Pushkarji, for hosting me. I actually only found out 5-10 minutes ago that the good folks of the ICG, which I think is you guys, you give authors a month free board, lodging, perhaps even a few drinks. So I'm now already framing the business case in my mind to my better half. That month in Goa that I desperately need to spend. We discussed, Pushkarji and I briefly discussed, what if I spend the month here and no book is written. Right, so there is always that risk, right? You come to such a beautiful place in such good company that you forget the book and you spend time with good people, intelligent people, having sophisticated conversation and nice sandwiches. But I think thank you so much. You guys are very kind people. Thank you for inviting me. The reason I'm saying this, right? There are not that many people in India who actually want to discuss these topics anymore, right? And that itself is one sort of break point. The India I grew up in, the Delhi I grew up in the 80s, and even I would submit to you till 5-6 years ago, not just in Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, Pune, these sorts of discussions were fairly commonplace, right? The fact that I've written a book on the middle class, whilst I would love to believe it's a brilliant book and I would request all of you to read it, I don't think we've done something path-breaking, right? Book on the middle class is, as the topic suggests, something useful, practical, and should be a subject of debate everywhere. This book is sold very well. It's done very well commercially for the publisher. But other than Pune, we haven't found a lot of people willing to engage in discussion. We've had a couple of sessions like this in Bombay, but in spite of my best efforts, the people at the session are all from basically one side of the discussion, right? The two sides, there are multiple sides in any economy, there are different perspectives on an economy, but it's been very difficult to get discussions going on what's happening to the middle class and is it right that this is what's happening to the middle class. Pune is the only city we have been able over the last 2 months to have serious discussions on what I think is a very important topic, right? So why did we write the book? I grew up in Delhi in the 80s. My mom was a maths teacher. My dad was a structural engineer. He used to design rockets. Then he used to design oil rigs for ONGC. And as like many other people of that era, my parents earned very little, and whatever little they earned, most of it went in paying taxes. So we grew up in fairly strained financial circumstances in the 80s, which ultimately resulted in us migrating to the UK in 1991. But by the mid-90s, liberalization did its thing, and jobs in India, for people like my relatives, my friends, jobs in India became fairly easy to get by the mid-90s, right? And that pleasant state of affairs continued, I would say, till 2019-20. In fact, the data in the book suggests clearly that till 2019, jobs for reasonably well-educated middle-class people were available. Our country used to produce around 3 million engineers a year, and out of them, okay, maybe it's a sign from above. So
We'll just pause a little bit.
Right.
We'll just switch.
I can stand there and speak. And so our country produces 3 million engineers a year, and out of them 1.5 million are pretty good. The data clearly shows till 2020, almost all of them were getting jobs. Right? It's very impressive actually. Till 2020, every 6 years, white collar jobs were doubling in India. And it's a big deal, right? You're creating 1.5 million jobs for well-educated people. In the last 3-4 years, that machine has broken down. So I first noticed this after COVID. I noticed some of the relatives my age, people in their 40s and 50s, were losing their jobs. So one of them was, for example, was a TV producer for one of the leading channels, and his job was automated away. So he used to schedule programs on a prominent Hindi channel, and his job was automated away. I have another uncle, he was in accounts payable in a restaurant chain in Bombay, right? And his job was also automated away. The fact that technology was gobbling up jobs, no surprises there, but these people were finding it very hard to get new jobs. And when they did get new jobs, they were at much lower pay, right? So my relative who lost his job in the TV channel then got re-employed by a YouTube channel, prominent one, but obviously a YouTube channel and a TV channel, there's a disparity in pay. So 2022, 23, I noticed this, and then in 23, I told my colleagues that we should do some more work on this. By that time, ChatGPT was a thing. By that time, the Silicon Valley hyperscalers were starting to announce that we have created new tech. It'll gobble up lots of jobs. At that point, an undefined number. And thus we got cracking somewhere in the summer of 23 on this subject of what's happening to the middle class. At that time, we didn't realize the jobs were drying up. I was just seeing some anecdotal evidence that middle managers were getting made redundant, and they were struggling to get re-employed with the same salary. So the first thing I told my colleagues is, let's get the definitions right? Because one of the things I noticed over the years is on books on middle class India, the definition of middle class was quite arbitrary and quite lazy, right? So the arbitrary definition of the middle class is it's somewhere between earning 5 lakhs to 25 lakhs, or 5 lakhs to 30 lakhs, right? So if you do that, right, if you define the middle class in a way where this is a country with enormous inequality, so if you set the upper bound for the middle class at a number like 20-25 lakhs, it's very easy for you to say 5 years later that look how well they're doing. They used to earn between 5 to 25 lakhs, now they earn between 8 to 30 lakhs. Isn't that lovely, right? And I felt that was quite arbitrary, because in a poor country, we're still one of the poorest economies in the world on per capita income. If you set the bar low, then a few years later you can say things have improved. So we said we will define the middle class. We'll have 2 criteria for defining the middle class. Firstly, they obviously should be in the middle of the income distribution, right? They should be in the middle of the income distribution, because otherwise how else are they the middle class? But secondly, and more demandingly, and we're the first people to do this, they should account for the majority of the income earned in the country, right? Not only should they be in the middle, they should account for the majority of the income earned in the country, because otherwise what is the point of analyzing the middle class, right? If you're going to analyze a small group of people who might be numerous in number but are not accounting for the majority of the income, you're not really doing any meaningful economic analysis. You might be doing social analysis, but that's a separate subject. Now, think of a country where everybody earns the same income, right? Think of a country where everybody earns the same income, and naturally, therefore, you can have the middle class from the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile. You've got half the country, half the income, and they're in the middle, right? Job done. So in a country with equal income from 25th to 75th, you've got half the country and it's job done, simple. But now think of India, super inequality, right? Mumbai, the city I live in, is the city with the 4th most number of dollar billionaires in the world. Only London, New York and San Francisco have more billionaires than Mumbai, right? And yet, as I'm sure you know, we are in one of the poorest countries, one of the 40 poorest countries on the face of the planet. So what we have is a country with enormous income inequality. So if you want to grab half the income, you have to set the lower bound at 5 lakhs, and the upper bound is not 25 lakhs, it's not 30 lakhs, it's not 50 lakhs, it has to be a crore. Only if you set the upper bound at a crore are you able to pull in 51% of the income of the country. So that was the first thing we did. We said, let's define the middle class as being in the middle and accounting for half the income in the country, right? With the definitions out of the way, we realized that this has very powerful implications. There's roughly, as per income tax data, there are 4 crore, I keep confusing, 40 million. There are roughly 40 million people in India, as per the FY23 accounts. There are 40 million people in India who earn between 5 lakhs to a crore, right? Out of those 40 million, the government has stopped giving this data in the last 3 years, but if they were giving the data, out of that 40 million, only half of them now pay income taxes. Yep. But those half, 20 million people, between 5 lakhs to a crore, 20 million people pay 75% of the income taxes. They account for 45% of the GST paid, and basically they account for another 200 million jobs in the country, right? So this tiny group of people, 40 million is the middle class by our definition, half of them pay income taxes, they also pay GST, and they account for 200 million jobs, basically the entire jobs piece, not just people like us, but the gentleman who drove my colleague Tanya and me here, the gentleman who served us the lovely cup of tea in Pushkarji's offices, that entire ecosystem hinges on these 40 million people, right? Just appreciate the ramifications. 1.5 billion people in the country, 1.5 billion people in the country, only 20 million people basically carry the economy, right? Now this is very unusual. Even without reading my book, you can understand how unusual it is. The lowest slab of income tax starts at 12 lakhs. Yeah. Our per capita income as a country is 2.5 lakhs. That means to pay income tax in India, you have to basically earn 5 times the per capita income, right? That is unprecedented. No other country in the world does it. So what we have created is an economy which is incredibly fragile, because actually it's dependent on a very tiny group of people, right? And you'll see in the book many different ways I've tried to convey this through data, that we've got a very tiny group of people paying taxes, a very small group of people who drive employment in the economy, right? And it creates enormous economic pressure because the economy is actually hinged on a small group of people like us, right? So 1.5 billion people, 40 million, just 40 million defined as the middle class, 5 lakhs to a crore. Out of that 40 million, only 20 million pay taxes, direct taxes, and though they also account for 45% of GST. But more importantly, they drive this little flowchart, which is a little small to see. I'm sorry about the font size. They drive the economic employment story, right? And the reason I'm setting the scene here is it'll help you contextualize what will happen next in the country, right? Now, as soon as we've done the definitions, we noticed that you can now apply it to unemployment data. Our data, and this is NSSO data, suggests 30% graduate unemployment. Azim Premji University, subsequent to this book, published a paper saying 40% graduate unemployment, right? That's higher than the 80s. The data I used was 29, suggesting similar to the 80s, but Azim Premji University's data, I think, is better. 40% graduate unemployment, that's the stock, right? Of the total graduates in the country, 40% as per them, 30% as per us are unemployed. Both measures are punchy. But the more breathtaking data is this, right? So we call this flow data in economics. Flow means, let me see, so hopefully this is centered. Flow means every year, if you look at the graduates coming out of college every year, how many are getting a job, right? So Azim Premji University is saying out of say 100 graduates emerging this year, only 4% are getting full-time jobs, right? And that's consistent with the whole stash of data that we have put in the book. So we took data from multiple sources, annual reports. This is from a company called Naukri. Naukri is India's largest employment classified database. It's owned by a company called InfoEdge. We are shareholders in InfoEdge. InfoEdge, I would submit to you, is a credible company, but you can make your own judgments about that. Now they publish, they're a for-profit company. They sell their employment database to hundreds and thousands of companies like us. We pay them a subscription for the data. And I asked them for data going back 2008 on jobs in India, right? And that's when we realized this grey line is their overall jobs index, right? Till 2020, it was doubling every 6 years. In the last 3 years, it's grown by 0%. Right? This is the first time, this is since 91, that jobs in India have started drying up. As you'd expect, the decimation in jobs is the most profound in IT services, but it's also kicking in sectors like retail. Until I saw the Naukri data, I hadn't clocked the fact that technology is also robbing the retail sector of jobs. IT is at the front and center. You can see on the far right side that on IT software, the jobs piece is completely conked out, right? The same data, you can look at NASSCOM. NASSCOM is the IT trade body. The same point of view emerges that jobs are now drying up. You open TCS's annual report, Wipro's annual report, HDFC Bank's annual report, ICICI Bank's annual report. It's the same story. 10,000, 20,000, 10,000, 20,000. No company puts out a press release saying we are laying off 25,000 people. And why should they, right? Are they going to have a hole in their head to put out a press release saying we're laying off 25,000 people? All you have to do is read the annual report and you see the decline in, or not just the decline, sharp decline. And interestingly, they're not sacking young people. All they have done is at the graduate level, dried up the intake. It's in the 40s and 50s, when employees are getting expensive, they are nudging them out and replacing them with younger folks plus AI, right? And it's happening across the world, but it's more acute in our country because our labor force is so vast and because our IT sector is such a big part of our economy, right? Now, I studied economics at the LSE at the 90s. I'd studied labor economics as one of my modules. And 4 years after I graduated, in 2002, a famous paper got published in the Quarterly Journal of Economics by 3 American economists who went on to become legends. Their surnames are Autor, Levy, and Murnane. What they showed in 2002, and their thesis played out spectacularly over the subsequent 20 years. What they showed for the West was, this is back in 2002, right? Just imagine these folks, 24 years ago, they used data from the 90s to show this. What they showed was what was happening in the West was high-skilled jobs were doing just fine. The CEO was rocking. The CEO was in fact in higher demand than ever before. And the low-skilled jobs were also fine. The garbage collector or the waiter or the cleaner in the factory was also fine. In between, the jobs were getting ripped out. So robotization, at that time, there was no AI then, robotization in factories through the 80s and 90s had ripped out the middle-class jobs, right? The jobs which say define cities like Detroit or St. Louis, Missouri, Cleveland, Ohio, parts of northern England, right? So technology ripped out the middle-class jobs, and they called it the polarization hypothesis. Polarization being the top-end jobs are good, the bottom-up jobs are good, the middle-class jobs get ripped out. And the fact that they wrote this paper before China ripped out the heart of manufacturing jobs in the West is even more dramatic, right? Because China then went on to rip out the heart of manufacturing jobs in the West. So we then said this makes a lot of sense. Is this happening in India, right? And thankfully we didn't have to do the work. A lady called Shrudipa Sarkar, she teaches at the National Law University in Bangalore. She had written her PhD thesis in Warwick University on this subject, and Shrudipa Sarkar had replicated the Levi Murnane Autor paper on India. And guess what? Shrudipa's paper, written in 2017 using data till 2013. Shrudipa's paper used data till 2013 and found that even in India, the same thing is happening. Factory jobs are getting, middle class jobs are getting ripped out. This is long before AI. Middle class jobs are getting ripped out. There are several other papers which we have cited in the book by credible people in India who were using data, who were showing that roughly around the turn of the century, technological automation started gutting middle class jobs, right? So we said this has started happening 20 years ago, that middle class jobs are being taken on by technology. It's clearly not going to stop now. It's actually going to accelerate on the back of AI, right? Now, before we go on to the next piece, the other very interesting thing which is happening, and this itself actually is a fascinating subject that a smart economics PhD can go to town on. The other very interesting thing that's happening is in India is, in the last 5-6 years, inflation, middle class consumer price inflation has rocketed. Right? The reason it's very interesting is, if you don't have jobs, you shouldn't be seeing very high inflation in basic things like medical insurance, hospital treatment, the cost of entry-level motorcycles, the cost of entry-level cars, right? Because remember, if your consumer doesn't have a job, how on earth are prices being raised? So the Maruti Alto is a very useful instrument for economists, because it's much the same car since 1995. Maruti Alto has been around since 95. It's an entry-level car, and it's been much the same car for the best part of 3 decades. Between 2019 and 2024, the Alto went up in price 50%. No jobs are being created, an entry-level car is up 50%. Entry-level motorcycles from Hero or from TVS, same story, right? And as I said, health insurance, medical insurance, hospital treatment, right? School fees, transport costs. So the cost of middle class living is rising at 8-9%. Reason I find this fascinating is this is happening at a time when jobs are basically disappearing as per multiple sources of data. Now, let's come back to the main story. Think about it. Suppose I am a capitalist, and I am one, right? I make money in the stock market. I have to be honest about it. If I can see that there are 80 lakh graduates a year, and I can see that nobody wants to hire them, right? And I can see there's a line of graduates outside my room, or hundreds of CVs coming into my inbox from IITs and IIMs. What am I going to do to my existing employees? Will I gratify them with large rewards, or will I squeeze them on compensation, right? It's a rhetorical question, but you can see what I'm getting at. So we said we will research this issue from 2 ways. Firstly, we will use the income tax data. We'll go into the income tax database and use reported data on those earning between 5 lakhs to 1 crore to see what's happening to their comp. And the answer is not much. In 2016, the middle class was earning 10.2 lakhs per annum. In 2026, they were earning 10.7 lakhs. I think that's a CAGR of 0.5% or 1%. And cost of living is rising at 8, maybe 7, right? That means every year in real terms, middle class's comp is actually falling by 5-6%. So one of the things I like doing, and technology allows us to do this, is once we create these nuggets of research, right, we put them out there on LinkedIn and social media to see the public's response, because you can learn a lot from other people's feedback. So we put it out there, and obviously there was outrage saying, Saurabh is a moron. He doesn't realize that the income tax data is a kind of moving feast. So the guy who was earning 10.2 lakhs last year, this year he might be earning 15 lakhs, so he won't actually be in that bracket. He would have jumped a bracket, and even though there's an appearance of stasis here, there's an appearance of stability here, actually everybody's jumping up, and therefore it's all good. This is misrepresenting. This is suggesting false stagnation. So I said, fair enough, that's a possibility, right? There's no point denying that possibility. So I turned to my colleague Nandita. She's a brilliant economist. So I said, Nandita, let's do something else. Let's take India's 50 largest companies, the Nifty 50. Let's look at their compensation. Let's divide it by the number of employees they have. Right? Do that for the top 50. Now follow them back in time 10 years. Today's Nifty 50, the mightiest 50 companies, follow them back in time 10 years. Right? And we did that. The results were almost identical. So whether you look at the income tax data or the annual reports of India Inc., salaries ain't moving, and they shouldn't, unless our capitalists have lost the plot. Why would you be paying people more if there are 80 lakh graduates coming out each year, right? Which means in real terms, the middle class is losing ground. Now let me go back in time further, right? Since one of the beauties of data, and our country has plenty of data actually, most people don't dig for it. You can go back in time from 2006 to 16. Guess what was happening from 6 to 16? Salaries were growing faster than inflation, right? And that's why the name breakpoint, right? You can see in multiple data sets, whether it's the jobs piece, the comp piece, and I'll show you one more thing in a bit. You can see clearly somewhere in the late teens, our economy breaks. Right? There's a clear demarcation in multiple data sets. Somewhere in the late teens, the jobs evaporate. Pay rises dry up, and the piece that you and I will now see break in front of us, debt explodes. It is unbelievable what has happened on debt, right? So let's just step back and think about this practically, right? One of the beauties in economics is you don't have to always get the data. Sit back and think practically. You are a young Indian, right? 25, 30 years old. You are either struggling to get jobs, or if you get a job, you're earning a pitiful amount. And yet, you're young, you're bright, you're ambitious, and you're living in a country where mobile data is free, effectively free. Mobile data in India costs 1/40th of Europe. And as the data suggests, you're spending 5 hours a day on average on social media. And on social media, you're being fed carefully curated images of luxury, of ostentation, right? Of the lifestyles of IPL cricketers and Bollywood stars. You're not exactly going to be living like Mahatma Gandhi if you're fed that from the age of 16, 17, 5 hours a day. And what are you going to do? Whether you have a job or not, it's irrelevant. You will borrow as much money God can give you to live the life that the film stars are living. And that's what young Indians are doing. 1 in 4, not even 1, 27% of personal loans are taken to go on holiday. Whilst we were researching the book, a lot of bankers asked us, do you not want a holiday loan, Mr. Mukherjee? And I said, no, I'm fine, thank you so much. Right? The second most common use of personal loans is to buy mobile phones. I can see the logic of that. The third most is to watch concerts. So as you might have known, right? I mean, in Mumbai, we live in one of the world's richest cities. So the world's great rock bands now visit us. And in the 80s, Bruce Springsteen visited Delhi in 1989. I didn't dare ask my dad for 200 rupees to go and watch Bruce Springsteen sing Born in the USA. But my daughter didn't think twice about first going to see Coldplay and then going to something called Lollapalooza, right? And these things cost 10,000, 15,000. And she said, Baba, you don't know, people fly in from other cities and they stay overnight and they watch and dance and drink and go back, right? And she was right, because when I return from business trips like the one today, I see people going to Mumbai for Coldplay and so on. But people are borrowing money for this, right? Because again, the jobs ain't there, the comp ain't there. The entry level salary of a IT programmer is 3 lakhs, if that. Actually, I'm giving the upper end. A fellow driving an earth mover in Bombay earns 6 lakhs. A construction industry worker in Bombay earns 6 lakhs. A fellow working in an IT firm in Mumbai earns less than half of that. So debt is exploding. The record so far is in one of the offices I was visiting for doing research in the book. The gentleman who served me tea, his boss told me, ask him how many loans he has. And this young man said he has 700 loans. And he said 670 I'm repaying. 670 I'm repaying, 30 is a bit of an issue, and those people are after me. He says, it's so unfair. I'm repaying 670, they don't appreciate that. They're sending the goons after me for the other 30, right? And I met dozens of people. In fact, in Mumbai, it's normal now to have 20, 30 loans. If you don't have 20, 30 loans, you're doing something wrong. So the level of, we call it household debt, excluding mortgages. The reason we're excluding mortgages, I think mortgages have merit. You might believe, I might believe houses are expensive, but taking a mortgage to buy a house in India is, I think, still a sensible decision. So if you exclude home loans, household debt to income is 32% in our country. It's the highest in our country's history by a country mile. It's almost 1.5 times what America has or China has. China and America are at 20%. China and America are at 20%. We too, India too, was at around 20% till the break point, till COVID. And after COVID, the red line is us. After COVID, we took off, and now household debt, excluding home loans, as a percentage of income is 32%. Practical implication of that is 40% of annual income. So let's go at it two ways. 70% of Indian families have loans, and for those families who have loans, 40% of disposable income goes in paying EMIs, right? That doesn't leave that much for consumption, which is why, and I'll finish with this slide, right? This is why, in spite of all this borrowing, consumption has gone into the doghouse, whether it is FMCG, whether it is consumer durables, right? And my reading of the situation is, this is the beginning of the AI shock. This is the beginning of the AI disruption. This is the beginning of social media's impact on our youth. This is the beginning of the consumer debt explosion. The rest of it will play out in the coming years, and unfortunately for us, that's coming at a time when Iran has decided, or America and Iran have decided to go eyeball to eyeball in the Middle East. So you're likely to live through a few years where interest rates are going to rise, and those middle class houses with that ton of debt will now have to pay higher and higher debt burdens, right? Now, in economics, there's always a positive side for people like us to make money off. Where will this take us, right? So first off, what we can make money off is the elite in India are doing exceedingly well, right? So those earning 1 crore or more, they're rocking in India, right? So in 2014, the number of income tax filers filing 1 crore or more returns was 50,000. This year, it's 350,000. So number of people earning 1 crore or more, up 7x in 12 years. Not only that, the identity of India's elite is changing, right? So we've done a little bit of data, I'll not bore you with it. Effectively, what we are finding is going to IIT or IIM or going abroad to study no longer counts for much. The local graduate now runs the boardrooms of corporate India. So opportunity and wealth is being democratized in that sense. And at one level, that's a good thing. I think this was the remaking of India in an incredible book in 2008. I think it's one of the most incredible books written in modern India. Harish Damodaran in 2007, actually not even 8, 2007, in an incredible book, Harish Damodaran foresaw this, right? So that's the first positive thing, that the old established elites of Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore are being disrupted quite profoundly. They're being shoved out of positions of power, not just in politics, but also in business life, right? The second interesting thing is, ignore my slide on this. Office jobs are not going to be there. So the youngsters are realizing that, and entrepreneurialism, setting up businesses, is becoming a way of life. So for my children's generation, taking an office job, seeking promotion, impressing the boss, staying long hours in the office is not going to be something that they will even think of doing. Indians are setting up 1 million companies a year, right? In this book, we've given the data. Indians are setting up 1 million companies a year, and courtesy folks like you and the private equity investors and the government, $40 billion of equity funding is available, right? We are already toggling away from being a nation of babus and office workers to becoming a nation of entrepreneurs. But the most powerful thing I see, right, is on the back of an epic boom in capex across the world. The world is spending more money than it's ever been seen before on defense, aerospace, on power, on data centers. The backwash of that is coming to India. Our currency will have to now give up. Our currency historically has given up 40% every decade. Our currency will now give up 50% a decade because the IT exports, remember, IT exports propped up our currency. The IT exports ain't going to be there to prop up the currency. So the currency is going to get punched down, which means our exporters will find it easier to export. This capex boom in the West is so big that they necessarily have to import some of the stuff from Asia. They are very keen to, they necessarily have to import some of the stuff from Asia. The Europeans and the Americans have to import some of the stuff from Asia. They're very keen to import from India. India makes its life difficult by having an overvalued currency, but the overvalued currency is melting away in front of us. So India's renaissance, that's why I call it Sagar Manthan. India's renaissance will be on the back of gig jobs in places like Coimbatore, Dehradun, Indore, Goa perhaps, right? Let's hope Goa, maybe you guys won't like the traffic that it will bring. But India's renaissance will come back on the back of white collar gig jobs in tier 2, tier 3 cities. It will also come on the back of the fading away of IT being at the vanguard of our economy. That will fade away. And manufacturers in Coimbatore, in Hosur, in Chennai, in Ludhiana, in the NCR, in Baroda, in Gujarat, they will drive the economic growth this point in. So the economy that we knew for the last 30 years, the India that we have known in the last 30 years is breaking down in front of us, and a new India is being built, and people like me were investing in that. Now, leaving aside my lining my pockets, making money from this, we're also doing something else. We are going to middle class Indians, right? We're going to companies and going to their factory workers and their receptionists and nurses in hospitals and saying, you don't want to be the receiving end of what will be a brutal shakeout in the economy. So that you're on the right side of the shakeout, we're helping people who earn a few lakhs a year do low cost global investing. So we've built a bit of software for ourselves, built a bit of technology, built a small team, and we go into large companies, whichever company gives us access, using our technology, using 1:1 counseling. We help people create low-cost, globally diversified portfolios, some American equities, some Indian equities, some gold, some bonds, liquid funds, super low-cost, diversified, and we are helping them build a portfolio which won't get hammered as we go through what will be the biggest economic shakeout that our country has seen since 1991, right? So there's a practical aspect to this as well. Whilst I would love to be the intellectual who gets to spend a month at your fine center with full board, sir, with full board, and some single malt in the evening will also be lovely, right? But I love to be the intellectual. I also have to do something useful, both to earn a living and for the rest of the country. So this is what there's a separate team in Marcellus. They help middle class Indians build low cost, globally diversified portfolios, which will hold up, we believe, in what will be, as I said, the deepest economic shakeout. So I'll stop there. And thank you so much. Thank you for giving us this opportunity, sir.
Saurabh, thank you. Very, very stressful going through those numbers, right? I mean,
right.
For most of us, I mean, whether we are going to be
caught up. To say, whilst writing the book, there were several nights I couldn't go to sleep because I used to look at the numbers, wake up at 2 a.m., recheck the numbers, because the numbers are genuinely jaw-dropping. What's happening in our country actually is jaw-dropping. And at one level, right, we shouldn't have had to write this book. We shouldn't have had to write this book. The stuff in the book is all based on publicly available data, right? There's there are people in our economy whose job is to publish that data, right? This is publicly available data, but for reasons I'm sure you can understand, I can understand, that wasn't published and it was left to people like us to basically explain the obvious. The jobs ain't there, salary growth ain't there, social media is causing a social catastrophe. People are borrowing crazy amounts of money, and in spite of all that, partly because people are borrowing crazy amounts of money, consumption is getting plastered, and the economy will now have to be rebuilt and reset. Right? So it was stressful to write it, but at the same time, the way I thought about it was, if I don't write it, what is the point of my being here at this point in time? If it's just to line my pockets, then there's no point. I could have just lived in London and done that, no? Lived in London, invested in India, made some money for myself, bought a nice house in a pleasant suburb of London. If I'm going to live here, I need to be doing something constructive. If you're going to do something constructive, obviously not everybody's going to appreciate it. That's why the dialogue is essential. Like, through dialogue, we get to understand each other, find ways forward, solutions for what is clearly going to be a solid economic crisis, right, which we live through for the next few years.
But the good thing is that for an academic to be writing this, the kind of audience an academic gets for writing the same thing is limited. Whereas somebody like you does
good
this,
point.
you reach a larger number
The
of people.
academic gets awards though. They get this and that award. We don't get any awards.
There are lots
In
of
fact,
book awards
if
these
you work
days.
in the stock market as a Bengali, you're seen as a very low form of life.
Okay. When I went through the book, I think right at the beginning you have a chapter on education. How education used to be the way to, move up the ranks, so to say. The two things that the late Vivek de Broy, I think one of the last op-eds that he wrote was, this tells us the story about his driver and how he borrowed money to send his kid to college. And after getting that college degree, the kid is not doing much, because there are no jobs. Now, education has lost, the importance that it had, but also the cost of education has gone up. So that's another part of it. Then what you see over the last 10, 15 years in particular is, again, lots of people borrowing or spending even their inheritances on sending their kids abroad to LSE for a master's degree, or to SOAS, or to Columbia, or wherever, for degrees in public policy and whatnot, without, enough jobs being there in this country in those areas. The question is this: if education is no longer the method to go up, is it because of, one, the quality of education? We know yes. Is it because not enough jobs are being generated? Two. Third, is it because, and linked to the first one, is it because there is that mismatch in the labor market, in the job market, between the skills that are needed and the skills that graduates have?
Yeah. So on the great Vivek de Broy, so he was married to a cousin of mine. So once I went to the Habitat Center in Delhi to help a friend of mine launch a book, right? And my friend, prominent economist, partly academic, partly civil servant. He said a few things about the book, and then I stood up and said a few more, slightly more spicy things, and then the star speaker, Mr. Vivek de Broy, was called. So I still remember his first line, right? His first line, and the audience was a mixture of few journalists, few NGOs, and there was samosa, there was chai, so the temperature was very low, right? And I got a master class in oration from Vivek ji. So his opening sentence was, "Is it possible to be an intellectual without being a Bengali?" and my eyes opened and everybody sat up. Obviously he said, "Of course it is possible. These two authors are examples of intellectuals who are not Bengalis, right?" So I don't have such spine to say things like that. But anyway, coming to your point, I think the reason that the education system is misfiring, and clearly is misfiring, because if you have a country where the unemployment rate for illiterates is 1/10 the unemployment rate for graduates, right? And if you have a country where you can clearly see that after class 12, every year of education both lowers your probability of employment and lowers your earnings, right? It's a double hammer. After class 12, the data is very clear, we put it in the book. After class 12, every year you spend in education lowers your earnings and lowers, Pushkarji, the probability.
And in many cases puts you in debt, high debt.
Right, yeah. So now HSBC did a study last year of middle class families. 80% of families want to send their kids abroad to study. HSBC also found out that 60% of families in India, the parents' retirement corpus is basically getting wiped out because junior is going abroad to study. HSBC also pointed out, and so has the RBI, that education loans are growing at 50% a year. And the non-performing, the NPA, the delinquency rate is the highest for education loans, right? So this seems to be a case of this desire to send people abroad seems to be the free market. The Indian parent is saying the local education clearly ain't going to get my children a job. They're right. The Premji University data does suggest the local education ain't going to get their kids a job. And Indian parents are actually also right. 70% of kids who go abroad and come back, 70% get a job within 6 months, right? Look at the disparity. 4% employment rate if you're a local graduate, 70% chances of getting a job if you come back. The only problem is by that time your parents are effectively wiped out their retirement savings, right? So the human drama behind all this is intense. Now, just to address your core question, I think all three are happening. We've put the data in the book. Narayan Murthy ji, no less, is quoted in the book saying the education system is no longer preparing kids for professional life. The thinking skills ain't there. The joint entrance exams are not testing thinking skills. The joint entrance exams are testing for rote learning and regurgitation, which is futile in professional life now. So a socialist education system is basically no longer preparing people for a capitalist economy. But it's also the case that no country in the world can create jobs for 80 lakh or 8 million graduates a year. Right? The numbers are also bonkers. 10 years ago, India used to have 60 million graduates. 20 years ago, India used to have 50 million graduates. So our graduate numbers are also ramping at a crazy pace, which no other country in the world has seen. So part of it is the demographics, unfortunately are mad. Part of it is the socialist education system is not being able to prepare kids for a capitalist economy. And part of it is AI disruption. The AI disruption is genuinely a challenge. Even in the UK, my son is studying in the UK, even in the UK or the US, graduate level employment is being hit by
hammered.
Is being hammered, right? So in America, entry level coders jobs are down by 25%. The only difference is they don't have 80 lakh graduates a year, right? There is a problem there, but it's a controlled problem. In our case, both at an economic level and at a social level. If you have 80 lakh kids coming out, hardly any of them getting a job. Imagine the social challenge that it's going to create. It's been 3 years of this. Just fast forward 3-4 more years. You'll basically have then multiply 80 by 5-6. You'll have 400-500 million unemployed youth. What will you do? I mean, the current issues that are playing out will look like a walk in the park if you have 80 million youth coming out 5-6 years without jobs.
No, but what worries me, Saurabh, even more is that the government of India continues to make, repeatedly say that we would like to see the gross enrollment ratio go up to 50%. It's at 30% now.
Yes,
that's even more frightening.
Yes,
so while population growth has slowed down, but we want to send more people to college for what?
So that's a global obsession. Policymakers across the world have this obsession that sending people to university somehow will magically transform their prospects in life. It's an obsession which has its roots in the 80s and 90s. Because in the 80s and 90s, as manufacturing was dying out, in the West, going to university did lift your earnings. To be fair, even in America today and UK today, being a graduate does give you a lift against not being a graduate. But in our country, because the content of graduate education itself is a challenge, and secondly, the number of graduates is crazy, there is no uplift. As I've shown in the book, there's actually a penalty. If you go to college, your probability of employment goes down, your earnings go down. So there are outdated mental models that use, I think, at multiple fronts. That was one of the reasons for writing the book, right? There are outdated mental models that at use on multiple fronts, not least in policy making, but also in middle class day-to-day life, where this obsession that our kids will be drilled and grilled so that they do well in joint entrance exams, then they somehow get a job in a large company, and that is nirvana. Those mental models that we as parents have had are also outdated, and they were drilled into us, right? In Bangla, we call it chakri, in Hindi it's called naukri. But both are terms which suggest that our mental models are built from an era where chakri and naukri were desirable things to do. The Indian economy is saying, sorry boys and girls, there is no chakri, there is no naukri. Figure it out for yourself. And at one level, I find that liberating, and that's why Harish Damodaran's India's New Capitalist book, I think, should be essential reading for every 15-16-year-old, that this country can do it, and we will perforce have to do it. So again, going to places like Nagpur and Indore and Chandigarh is actually very heartening, because you can see erstwhile white-collar salaried people now doing gig jobs globally. So there's a platform called Upwork, right? It's a listed company in New York. On Upwork, you can sit in Goa and bid for a Tanzanian restaurant chain's CRM software or MIS software build. A big project on Upwork is $1 million, but there are hundreds of small projects bid out every night, which are $20,000, $40,000. And a software engineer laid off from a big IT company in Bangalore can stay in a flat in Goa, bid on Upwork, build a very nice life for himself, herself. If he or she is ambitious, he can also employ 4 other people sitting in their bedrooms in different parts of the country, and all of them are doing gig work on Upwork. In fact, he doesn't have to employ them full time. He might say, I've just got a project in Tanzania which requires 3 of you. It's a 2-day project. Please join me. I'll pay you so much. And after 2 days, those people can go and work for Pushkarji or me on something else. So the world of employment will radically change in the next 4 or 5 years. And the big city glass buildings that we have seen in Bangalore and Gurgaon, they will increasingly become redundant.
So one should not invest in real estate?
I have never been a proponent of real estate investing, and even less so now. And the other way you can track this, again, beauty of India's data is everywhere. So go to Magic Bricks and 99 Acres, they are real estate classified sites, and you will see residential real estate markets in the tech hubs are frozen solid. Nobody wants to buy anything, right? You're going to be out of your mind to buy a flat in a tech hub today, because tomorrow morning you don't know whether you will be part of the 12,000 who will be laid off as the next upgrade on Claude or Gemini or OpenAI kicks in. So remarkable churn, right? We're taking the country, churning it from top to bottom, right? The whole office job construct goes out of the window. Graduation as a desirable institution goes out of the window. Staying in a big city, working in a prestigious firm in a glass tower goes out of the window, right? The sorts of things Bengalis frowned upon, business, entrepreneurship, right? They call people like, in Bangla we are called dalals, right? Because we intermediate in the stock market. So it sounds better in English if I say intermediation than if I say dalal in Bangla or Hindi. But all of that, right, will now come to the forefront. Our children's generation will have to do gig work, and I think they'll quite enjoy it, right? As my colleague Tanya will testify, in our office the youngsters would rather not come to office, or if they come to office with the gents, it's hard to get them to shave. Sometimes it's hard to get them to put shoes on, right? And putting on trousers, shirt, and shaving and shoes, my God, that's just, what's wrong with you? So the youngsters will take to this as ducks to water.
I think you're probably right about this. We have a 20-year-old, so
it'll work out well.
We see signs of that.
No, it'll work out well, just that the disruption is profound, right? And there's 2 to 3 years. So technology has 2 effects, right? So just to use an old example, 1880 Edison comes up with the light bulb, right? Menlo Park, General Electric. Edison comes up with the light bulb. Immediately it's obvious that the candle maker is screwed, right? And the gas guy who lights gas lamps in New York, he's also fried now, because you don't have to be a techie to figure out with the light bulb, the gas light and the candle are redundant, right? So that's the substitution effect. That's what we are living through now, right? That's what the book is about. But by 1910, it was evident that there'll be something called nightlife, and there'll be a gramophone, and therefore there'll be a rock star or a jazz singer, and then there'll be Hollywood. That's the complementarity effect. Now, in that era, it took 30 years for the complementarity effect to arrive. I think in our era, the complementarity effect will arrive far quicker, right? So we will have to live through the substitution effect, and then I think all of us will be around to see the happier side of it. The only challenge I foresee for you guys is your real estate. I think this place will get very busy. I've got this nasty feeling when I go to Panjim that this city is going to get super busy as all the white collar tech gig workers descend upon divine city like yours, right? They're not going to obviously, if you don't have to hang around in Bombay, you'll come to Goa, right? And the more trains, the more flights, the more airports you lay, the more of us from Bombay will descend.
So that is the fear here, that Goa will become a Bombay outpost.
Embrace it. Give us people like us a chance to come and live.
I hate the idea, but it's going to happen. We know it. So you talked a lot about the IT sector taking a beating, right? Now, one thing that, as an outsider, I'm not an economist, one reads a lot about GCCs, the explosion of GCCs over the last 5 to 10 years. Can that basically fit in somewhere between, because manufacturing, becoming a manufacturing power, so to say.
So I think
it's not going to be easy.
I'm not so sure that the IT sector itself will disappear. The jobs are clearly going to disappear, right? I think the IT jobs are going to get decimated. The sector will probably hang around. They will repurpose themselves for doing AI jobs for Western companies, right? Now the GCCs will suffer the same dynamic, right? Why will a Western company not deploy AI in its Indian operation? So again, many of the GCCs have announced, many of the biggest GCCs have frozen hiring for exactly the same reasons as we are discussing. The CEO in Wall Street has told the GCC head in India, please use Claude, please use Gemini, hire fewer people. Part of the reason is he doesn't want to be asked by a fund manager in New York, sir, how many people do you employ in your Indian GCC? And if he says, oh, I employ 75,000 people, the American fund manager will say, have you not heard about AI? Right? So it's the same dynamic, right? So there's no, the GCCs are not going to be knights in shining armor. Many of them are already frozen unemployment. Now what you might see is a few more GCCs might arrive because they can actually get the job done in India with relatively few people. So mid-sized American company or a mid-sized European company.
And lower wages might
lower wages, but what happens is the beauty about AI is with AI, one person can do 5 people's job anyway. So what you're looking for is for that one person to be hyper competent, because the wage arbitrage in a way is somewhat neutralized. It doesn't go away totally, but it's somewhat neutralized. And if you want to think about it like that, that's actually the biggest challenge AI poses for us. Across the world, the substitution effect will kick in, the complementarity effect will kick in, right? That's common to the world. But in our case, our main offering was cheap white-collar labor. That was our main offering, right? It wasn't brilliant white-collar labor. It was cheap white-collar labor. And because AI reduces the relevance, it doesn't entirely wipe it out, it reduces the relevance of that, it basically puts us on the back foot as an economy, right? For a country like Japan or Sweden or Germany, where population was a challenge, young people were hard to find. So my parents live in England in a small town where it's difficult to find baristas. So the coffee shops are only open 5-6 hours a day because they can't get people for the rest of the day, right? 1 in 4 trains gets cancelled because they either can't find the driver or the guard, right? So countries like that where population is a challenge, AI is a gift from God because it neutralizes their deficit in people, and unfortunately for us, it reduces our competitive advantage in producing 80 lakh graduates a year, right? That's why AI is a disruptor. Just so that we are aware of the risks here, because when I present the book, right, a lot of people I speak to, they have this bizarre assumption in their head that technology always works out. It always works out in the end, right? It does work out in the end. The only question is how long is that transition from substitution to complementarity. So I gave you a 30-year transition, light bulb to Hollywood. Now I'll give you an even scarier one. 1750, steam engine industrial revolution comes to England. From 1750 onwards, the factory owners realize that, hey, we can automate these factories and we don't need these grown men to now run these plants. We can have 10-year-olds and young women to do this work. They're cheaper, right? So for 100 years, for the first 100 years of the Industrial Revolution, you get a massive substitution away from grown men who are expensive towards cheaper labor and steam power, right? So in those 100 years, per capita income in England for the middle class falls. Historians have shown that British people's height falls because their diet suffers, right? They've used multiple things, height, teeth, etc. to figure out that people's diet fell because their incomes fell because grown men were rendered redundant, and young children, right? Famously, the Charles Dickens books, right? Charles Dickens books are about this. Young children were employed in factories to do the basic work on power looms because physical strength and skill were rendered irrelevant by technological change. 1850, technology started changing again and the complementarity effects kicked in. So complementarity effects can come in 30 years, they can come in 100 years. Hopefully for us, they will come in 3 years, but there is no guarantee. There is no guarantee from any global guru or a desi guru that the complementarity effect will come very quickly. It will come one day, we don't know when.
I think I'll end here and now open it up
Sure. Thank you so
to
much.
the
Thank you
audience.
for